Carolyn Dube here. Oh, what's the play for today? Well, today I'm taking a piece of IKEA furniture, a little white side table, and I'm putting the rainbow on it. I'm going to add a whole bunch of color to that, and I'm going to be doing it with my daughter. This was a project that we did together, and you're going to see what we created. Now, along the way, we had lots of fun, but there was a step that I skipped that led to a problem later on at the end of this project, and you'll see how I handled that and hint it's not something that you want to do. You want to not use that for that, but you'll see when we get to that part in the video. And then all the way at the very end, you'll see why it didn't bother me that I didn't have all the right supplies or perfect things that I needed to do this. This white IKEA table is about to have a little color added to it. We're doing paint pouring directly onto this thing. Now, the two hands there, one of them's mine and one of them's my daughter. Now, the two cups look like they were completely different paints, but they weren't. You see, we mixed up a few colors and then we each added our own combination of them to the cup. But those are all the same colors that we're both using, just different amounts of different ones. So how much did we put of the pouring medium or the paint, and how did we mix those up? Well, all of those kind of details I've got for you if you're new to paint pouring in something called my paint pouring guide. And I'll have a link down below for you, and it's about a 20-page guide there that explains everything you need to know about getting started with paint pouring, including several different kinds of pouring medium. Now, there are tons of pouring mediums out there that you can use, and I'm talking about a few of them in terms of their characteristics in the guide, and you'll see why it is that I love Floetrol so much in this guide, and that is the pouring medium that I'm using here when I'm doing this table. As we were putting these ribbons of color on here, as those layers of paint were being poured out of the cup, we were just having a grand old time seeing what patterns showed up. It wasn't that we had this big plan here. It was more of being just in the moment, having fun, and seeing what happens when that color ends up on there. One of the things that allows me to let go and play when I'm doing paint pouring is knowing that it's not going to make a mess. By putting a cardboard box under there, that means the paint's going to drip in there, because there's always a little bit that goes over the edge, and spoiler alert, there might be more that goes over the edge before we're done here. But by having a box larger than whatever you're working on underneath it, that's going to catch your drips. You might even notice that duct tape that's running along the inside of the box, because that's where I was worried paint might flow out. So that's why I just added a quick layer of duct tape. That'll make sure that should any drips get all the way to the edge, they're not going to end up on the floor. At this point, we were trying to decide, do we leave all that white space on there? Do we leave it so not much of the paint is dripping over the edge? Or do we add more and let it really go over the edge? Well, I guess you can tell which one we went with. We decided to add more paint to it. I love the look of paint going over the edge of a canvas, and I definitely wanted it for this table too. Plus, anytime there's white space, I have this compulsion to want to cover it up with color. So we're bringing in more paint and pouring medium mixed together here and adding color. Now that very fancy tool that I'm using there, that's just simply a condiment squirt bottle. Basically some way where I can easily get paint where I want it to go. You might be wondering what kind of prep work I did to get this table ready so that the paint would adhere to it, because, well, you didn't see any of it in the video, right? Well, that's because I didn't do anything to prep this, and that wasn't the best choice. So usually what I do for something like this is I put on a super duper heavy duty primer that I get from a hardware store. And there are lots of different brands of it, but just one that really sticks well. So why didn't I do it this time? Well, because I couldn't find it. I know it's in the garage, and I don't think I used it all up, but I couldn't find it, so I decided, hey, I don't want to miss out on this fun play with my daughter, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it without it. Because after all, if it doesn't work, this is a whopping, I think, $8 table from IKEA. We let it dry overnight, and this is what we came back to in the morning. All this detail, all these cells, all this pattern, no torching, none of that stuff, just simply pouring the paint on there. Well, this table was one we loved way too much for it not to be saved. Because remember how I said I didn't do the prep work on it? I'm going to have to do something to really seal this stuff in. If I'd had the primer on hand so that the paint could really adhere to it, I wouldn't have to make this step such an important one. But since I didn't do that, I need to make sure that I've got a really nice protective covering over the top of it. And resin would be the ideal thing for it because that'll really cure up. It'll be very, very durable. You know, countertops can be done in that stuff, except I don't have any resin on me. So I decided to use what I had on hand. And that is something that I actually don't recommend you using because it wasn't meant for this. And there's a good reason for that. Since I didn't have the perfect supply on hand, the one that I knew was just right for the job, I went looking through my closet to see what I had that could give me a very clear, solid protective covering for this. And that's when I found the self-leveling clear gel in my closet. So that's what I'm putting on here, but here are some things about this. One is it needs to be put on in thin layers. If it's too thick, it will do something called crazing, and it's almost like it's cracking where the top of it is drying faster than the bottom, and so you get what looks like cracks in it. And I didn't want that. So to help make sure that I get a nice thin coat on here and get it spread around, I used gravity to help me out. So by putting it on its side, I'm going to let gravity kind of help even some of this stuff out. Now, in a perfect world where I was incredibly patient, what I would do is give this maybe half an hour to just let it run down the side a little bit, and then I'd rotate the table and let it do it some more, but I'm not really wired that way. So I let it go as long as I could here, letting that self-leveling gel kind of move around, but I just couldn't give it that much time. I'm just not that patient. So even though gravity was eventually getting the job done, I decided to come back in and help it out. Even though the name of it is self-leveling clear gel, that doesn't mean it can self-level through anything. So those big areas, those ridges that you see there that I've got, if I don't get them smoothed out all the way, they are going to show up in the final piece. But here's the thing. Because this is such a busy pattern, unless you are really looking at it up close and have just the right glare on it, you don't notice it at all. So what's the big reason not to use self-leveling clear gel to do this? Well, it has to do with what I call the sticky factor. Now, when you put this stuff on, it'll dry and you're not going to have any stickiness from it, like when you touch it, put a piece of paper on it, it's not going to stick to it. But when you say set a glass on top of it, anything that might have some paint on it, anything that's shiny, glossy, it will actually stick to it. So imagine that you had a big painting and you were resting something on top of it. You know, the paint might stick to it over time. That's the same kind of thing that can happen here. So that's why if I was making this as a gift or that kind of thing, I would not put this stuff on top of it. I would take the time to make sure I have that primer or head to the store and pick some up so I don't have to worry so much about this top coat. Here's the table now with a beautiful shine to it thanks to the self-leveling clear gel, which by the way would work great on a picture that you were going to hang on the wall, but not so great for a table. So do I regret doing this table even though I didn't have all of the right perfect supplies on hand to do this? Nope, not one bit. Because you see, my daughter was only home for a short period of time, and if I'd waited until I got all the perfect supplies together, until we had time to actually make and create and play together, we would have missed out on that time. And that to me is even more important to me than the finished table. Now we have that table as a reminder, a memento, like a souvenir of our time playing together. And the older she's gotten, the harder it is to squeeze that kind of time into our lives. So I'm grateful for every chance I get for it. So when you're playing, when you're trying to decide if you have the right supplies, I highly encourage you to just use what you have and go for it. That way you get to have the fun right now. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's play. If you've been enjoying this video, I'd so appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my stuff, hit that subscribe button. That way you'll know as soon as I've got a new video out. And you bet there's lots more stuff for you over on my website at acolorfuljourney.com. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.